Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Connecting the Dots, where we explore ideas to advance the energy sector in sub-Saharan Africa. Today, we have the pleasure of talking around the CNG initiative in Nigeria. The idea of harnessing compressed natural gas has been in Nigeria's energy policy pipeline for decades. However, Nigeria's energy transition and the escalating cost of transportation prompts a growing interest in the use of CNG for alternative fueling. In response to these challenges, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu inaugurated the Presidential CNG Initiative in August 2023. This initiative holds a visionary outlook seeking to harness Nigeria's abundant natural gas resources. A pivotal aspect of the plan involves the importation of 10,000 three-wheelers and 100 buses, a strategic move aimed at catalyzing the development of mass transportation. Importantly, this initiative enjoys the backing of both national and international stakeholders. Unfortunately, the rate of CNG adoption in Nigeria is low. This episode discusses the progress in adopting CNG as an alternate fuel and Nigeria's preparedness for this transformative shift. My guest today is Michael Oluwagbemi, the Program Director for the Presidential CNG Initiative. He also serves as the Chief Executive for the initiative. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent, Michael. So if you could please give the audience a background of your experience and what you're currently up to.
Yeah, thank you very much and good morning for the opportunity to discuss with your audience and to share views around the opportunity for leveraging compressed natural gas to help Nigeria grow its economy, especially providing a low-cost fuel alternative to the transportation sector that is not just cheaper, cleaner, but also more reliable in supply. My name is Engineer Michael Oluwagbemi. I have over 2 decades of experience in engineering, technology, and of course, energy. Started my career in ExxonMobil, then in the United States where I schooled, and then of course, with an engineering background, 2 degrees in electrical engineering and 1 degree in business administration. I started my career in ExxonMobil and onwards to Wally Parsons, where I rose to the position of project manager, and then went into private practice and went back into the entrepreneurial private sector. I was served as executive vice president at Amazon Energy in Nigeria. And helped build a number of entrepreneurial concerns in the oil and gas industry. Before focusing fully on the venture capital side of things in 2012, grew my own company, Lofting Allied Partners Limited, to manage VCs and VC funds and incubators and accelerators. A lot of the companies we invested in were also in energy. Served briefly on the board of the Rural Electrification Agency at the behest of the immediate past president, Muhammadu Buhari, for about 2 years, and was asked by the current president in August to help develop the plan for the compressed natural gas initiative, which is a palliative measure, was envisaged originally as a palliative measure upon the removal of fuel subsidy. So it's been my journey. A lot of it had been transversing energy as well as entrepreneurship. And I think that this current work, which is essentially developing a startup program for a new sector in Nigeria, for the public sector, is a combination of these 2 strong backgrounds I have in energy and entrepreneurship.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us, Michael. And you mentioned a number of things in your introduction that have piqued my interest. So things around the CNG initiative was initially designed as a palliative measure given the removal of fuel subsidy. But as you noted also, it's something that we could really use to realign or reorganize the sector where we're not so dependent on petroleum. So with the current efforts that the PCNGi is making to see development of alternative fuel in Nigeria, what are your projections for the transportation sector in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think transport sector, as we all know, is a critical component of the economy. It accounts for about 16% of our expenditure in individual households. It's a significant part of Nigeria's GDP, contributing anything from 1.89 to 2.75% on a quarterly basis. So if we're able to provide a low-cost alternative to fueling it, gives it an immediate opportunity to expand. And if it expands, it fuels our GDP. If it's cheaper, then our families can afford it more, reduces rate of inflation at the individual household level and at the broader level. So these are just important things to note with respect to transportation and the opportunity to use CNG to power it.
So as far as the adaptation of CNG in the space, what's been the biggest challenge for people to move from the normal fuel that they've used to now adopting to CNG?
Yeah, like any new technology is always it's about change. I mean, right? I mean, everything would rather remain in the current state that is in than that to go into another state. So there's a inherent liturgy for change. And that also has to do with a fear. A lot of people have a fear of gas, and they feel that gas is more explosive, and which is not true. Actually, CNG is much safer than PMS because it has a higher flash point. It's stored in a thicker containers. Upon impact, it cannot explode because it's lighter than air and dissipates quickly. Again, these are just things that impediments to adoption. But even more so, I think the availability of supply and the infrastructure gap that is currently present in Nigeria. We have just about 23 compressor daughter stations, less than 7 conversion workshops, less than 12 refueling stations, or maybe 15 if you add a few that are just coming up. For a country of 200 million people, spread over almost 1 million square kilometers, that's very tiny. So I think the psychological inherent challenge of change, combined with the physical challenge of the lack of infrastructure and supply of CNG to the sector, are just one of those impediments. But they can both be overcome by the work that we are doing. The essence of the work we're doing is to overcome these impediments, to be able to sensitize the people, educate the people about the benefits of transitioning to CNG, but also providing the incentives to the private sector to invest and to support the development of the infrastructure and the gas supply necessary to drive the adoption of CNG in Nigeria.
Excellent. So really, you mentioned that there's only 12 refueling stations in country, and it looks like obviously it requires some substantial investments to really build out the infrastructure. How is that going, and what is the plan to build those required refueling stations and just to build the entire value chain from end to end?
Yeah, so the plan is a straightforward one. It's to first provide incentives. So in December, the government announced the import duty waiver exception for the sector, as well as VAT waiver. That's just one of the many incentives we are planning to line up for investors to come into the sector. In addition to these, we are strongly encouraging the conversion of vehicles, because once they will stimulate the demand, then investors will see that that's demand signaling is going to generate interest of investors to then invest in supply. Once there's an investment in conversion, that is a considerable demand signaling, which will then signal to investors to invest in supply. So these are one of many ways that we are going to be encouraging the development and investment into the infrastructure and supply that is necessary for the sector to be launched. So there are many multi-pronged approach, but those approaches are targeted at one and one only thing: to attract investment to the sector, especially from the private sector, so that they can bridge the gap that we are experiencing in terms of infrastructure and supply.
Excellent. So it's really around attracting private sector investment, but private sector normally likes to see government take the first swing at solving a problem. And I know this initiative is one of those steps towards government showing interest and taking the lead to create the enabling environment. From the initiatives, are there 2 or 3 tangible things an investor could sit across the room and say, yes, this is something I can see government has done to take the step forward to creating this enabling environment for the private sector to come in to do work in the compressed natural gas space?
Yeah, so first thing is that this initiative, government is investing a net of 230 billion naira between last year and this year in the sector. That's fully funded initiative of the federal government. It's a considerable amount of resources going into the conversion incentives that we are going to be putting in place to enable Nigerians to convert existing vehicles to hybrid biofuel, right? We're hoping to have at least 250,000 of those on the roads before the end of the year. And by 2027, a million of those. That's demand signaling. So if you're an investor, that's telling you that a million vehicles will be requiring your CNG. So you can invest in gas, you can invest in pipeline, you can invest in compression boiler station, you can invest in refueling stations, right? So that doesn't get better than that. We'll also be devoting a lot of money into training of technicians and developing a regulatory framework for the sector. If that is absent, then it's very difficult to have. The initiative is going to be putting a lot of resources into that. Lastly, we're also putting resources into the purchase and the procurement and the distribution of CNG platforms, including tricycles, buses, and EVs, as the case may be. So again, that's ongoing. It signals to the private sector that it's serious about transitioning of into CNG for the transportation sector. And you can bet the government have put their money where their mouth is. It's left for the private sector to follow suit.
Great news, because it shows that government has laid the groundwork. Now it's a matter of the private sector to come in. And we're hoping, from historical point of view, government created an enabling environment for the telecom industry, and the projections MTN made to hit in the long run, that actually ended up hitting in the short run. So I'm hoping that this is another angle that private sector use and come in and really disrupt the transportation sector, because it's clear what's currently happening with the fuel prices is not something to write home about. So maybe the other angle I would look at is the cost of doing the sort of private citizen, right? So there are obviously concerns about the cost of converting the vehicles to use CNG, and it may not be affordable for a lot of Nigerians in the present time. So what are some of the cost mitigations to CNEs with adoption? Will there be collaboration with local manufacturers to support this effort? And more importantly, will any of these parts have to be imported, given what is happening with the foreign exchange rate?
So today, the cost of conversion is mostly is relatively high because, of course, it is imported. Part of this program is to develop incentives to make sure that cost is shared with the initiative, with the government. Over time, also, is to develop local manufacturing capacity so that the cost of conversion kits, cylinders, valves that will be utilized in vehicle conversion is drastically reduced. In terms of CNG platforms like tricycles and automobiles, we're currently also collaborating with local manufacturers. All 100% of the vehicles that we are bringing in are manufactured, are going to be assembled locally, even though they might be parts, of course, will come from across the world. So all of that is also encouraging local manufacturing. So in the long run, the way to go when it comes to conversion as well as auto asset cession is to develop, of course, a resilient auto financing market for Nigeria, which currently does not exist. I think that is, of course, beyond what the initiative is set up to do, but it's something we must bear in mind, that the cost of acquiring assets or platforms in the transportation sector is quite hefty today, not just because of the price, but because of the lack of mechanism for finance. And I think the government is working with various stakeholders are currently looking at creating or developing a credit economy for Nigeria. And I think that is what will actually ultimately suffer.
Interesting. So when you say credit economy for Nigeria, we're looking at the aspects of Nigerians being able to borrow and finance these vehicles and then pay it off over time, correct?
Yeah. I mean, like, President talks severally about consumer credits and the need to create a consumer credit financing system for Nigeria. It's a tool, not just the president always talks about it in the context of corruption, that public service has a pressure to be corrupt because of the lack of consumer credit. But even also that people tend not to be able to plan for their lives. But even there's an even deeper impact on job creation. I mean, because your ability to borrow as like an economy, deep into economy, allows you to be able to take money from the future and bring it to the present, and then create the future that you deserve in the present. So if you are not able to finance auto vehicles and your automobile industry is based on cash transactions, then the volume that they will be able to produce the automobile plants is going to be quite significantly capped. However, if the auto
Mm-hmm.
finance exists and people are able to afford vehicles that they will pay over the next 5 years, that is capturing all their revenue, their salaries, and their income for the next 5 years and bringing it to the present. That allows the auto manufacturing companies to increase the volume of production, increase the job creation, and boost the overall economy. So creating a consumer credit economy is just is an imperative in my mind if we want to actually be able to have a viral and strong automotive sector, which again is central to what we are doing here. I mean, we're talking about transportation. So it's not just about the transport sector, the energy sector. Sync one on to what we're doing in this initiative is the automotive sector. And how do we, Nigeria, develop unique selling points, so to say, by being an hybrid CNG developing country that we can even export those vehicles to our neighbors while also exporting gas to them and probably use gas as a leverage for international diplomacy.
That's a really interesting point because we look at the CNG, we look at just the credit system in the country and it's nowhere to be found. But I'm hoping with NIN and a few of these things that the government has put in place, that there'll be a better way to track Nigerians as a way to check to ensure where someone lives is where they live, and then you can now verify who the person is and be able to give them credit based on the knowledge you have about the consumer. So this is really good news. Going around the net zero plan for 2060 that Nigeria has, we're currently run 50 on the grid for power generation. They've probably aggregated 50 gigawatts worth of diesel and fuel generators, and we obviously emit a lot of CO2 there. CNG provides a different, I guess, an alternate angle, an alternate way of addressing the problem. So really, what are the opportunities that are out there that we can use CNG to be able to reduce the amount of CO2 that's being emitted in the transport sector? Because from what I remember from the energy transition plan, the most emitting sectors were the power sector and then the transport sector. So how much of an effect will the CNG initiative have the transport sector as far as emissions in the long run?
Yes, as you know that CNG creates fewer smog related tailpipe emissions than gasoline. It can reduce tailpipe GHG by about 20%. So it is a reality that by us transitioning to CNG, we end up helping to reduce greenhouse gases and the emissions that are associated with them. In terms of the Nigeria's meeting its nationally determined estimate, NDE's contribution to the Paris Global Accord to reduce emissions. CNG vehicles emit 5 to 10% less CO2 than comparable gasoline-powered vehicle, and so it just makes sense that we lead this transition.
And just from a local point of view, the CNG filling stations in Nigeria mostly located where?
Today in Nigeria, most of the refueling stations are actually located in Benin, in Edo State, because of the NNPC pilot that had been taking place there since 2017. But as at late last year, NNPC signed an expansion strategy with NIPCO to establish at least 2 in every state capital, which already has maybe like couple, and private sector is also coming in with couple. So we hope that the footprint of these refueling stations will expand from less than 15 today to at least 100 before the end of the year, and will continue to grow.
Interesting. Okay, that's good. So moving into the other part of Nigeria that most people forget about, because most people think about Nigeria as Abuja, Lagos, Benin City, in Enugu and so on. There's 18 million Nigerians or so living in the rural communities. So how can we use CNG, or are there plans to use CNG to develop the rural economies in Nigeria?
Yeah, I mean, CNG has immense benefit for the rural economy. But again, it's always a question of fueling challenge and how do we get it there? Of course, it's lower cost, cheaper, and all of that stuff. But we just like the way we are, it's not just the rural economy or the rural environment that is today lacks the infrastructure, it's the entire Nigerian economy. But if we're able to deliver it, of course, naturally, if you look at the keke napep, for example, that are used mostly in the rural areas for transportation, or especially transportation of farm goods. If we can able to move our diesel trucks to CNG, the implication for cost of food for the entire country. So these are the opportunities that when we talk about the impact of CNG potentially for Nigeria's rural economy.
My fear is always around these new things that we talk about in the city centers, that the people in the rural areas don't actually see the benefits of it. Are there, or maybe they don't understand it, are there platforms or things that are already set up, or initiatives that are set up to educate and to capacity build people in the rural communities in order to be able to understand what CNG is and how it could positively impact their society?
Yeah, we again, like I said, today, this is a new program for the entire country. I mean, it's not just, I mean, there are very few parts of Nigeria that have impacted with CNG. There's a plan for heavy sensitization and public engagement of both rural and urban dwellers, of cities and village dwellers, of clans and hamlets across the country. This is actually central to our work, the public sensitization. Transportation, like I said, is agnostic to where you live. I mean, at the end of the day, if you live in a rural area and you are not being transported, or your goods are not being transported, then the urban area will suffer. So for us, it's about building a national infrastructure, be it in rural or in urban centers, and more importantly, to support the population of Nigeria to be able to deliver greater economic prosperity for all Nigerians, rural or urban.
What are the next steps? You mentioned the 230 billion naira that the initiative has put into the sector, and you're looking at a number of different educate and enlighten people on this alternative fuel in Nigeria. But from a point of view of everyone getting involved, besides the work the CNG initiative is doing, do you think there's enough public enlightenment around CNG? If not, what are some suggestions you could give to the private sector, the development partners, to get involved into solving this transportation crisis that we currently have?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots to be done in terms of bridging the information gap, no doubt. There's a lots to be done, and the work is just starting. So we look forward to working with development as well as technical partners in these efforts. But more importantly, with members of the public, be the media, as the case may be. The most important thing for us is to enlighten the public about the benefits of this transition, to support the public on the path to transition, and deliver for the president the vision of an alternatively fueled transportation sector that is driven by the natural gas the nation is endowed with, which is our God-given resources. Nigeria being a gas province, bountiful gas all across the country, to drive the economic development of Nigerians and to deliver a higher standard of living for all Nigerians.
Excellent. So finally, as we move into 2024, what are some of the short-term goals that the initiative wants to accomplish this year? And what are the long-term goals, long-term being 2027 for the initiative?
Yeah, as previously said, I mean, our goal this year in the near term is to get at least 250,000 vehicles converted. 27 goal is of 1 million vehicles. We're also hoping that we set up the regulatory framework for conversion this year and to ensure the distribution of the initial platforms that were acquired by the federal government, leveraging, developing an on-lending system and piloting an on-lending system for financing vehicles that are CNG vehicles under the program. So these are one of many of our goals, and of course, attracting investment and financing to the sector.
So then, just as a way of doing monitoring and evaluation, is there public domain or public announcement that comes out to show how the initiative is doing towards the 250,000 goal by the end of the year? Because if not, we can definitely use this platform as a way to track that, so the average Nigerian can see how the initiative is doing, and see that it's actually picking up steam as a way to educate and enlighten these people?
Yeah, there is. It's a public program, and we have a regular briefing along this path. I mean, we are just starting, so we do not even expect the first conversions to take place till the end of this quarter, but it will pick up very quickly. The pace of our engagement with private sector also matters. It's not us delivering it by ourselves, so it's not as if we are the one doing the conversions. We will incentivize the conversion, and we'll continue to work with our private sector partners to deliver it. We do not intend to replace business. We are on the government side of things, but what government should do is develop a very robust regulatory framework, which is what we are doing, and provide incentives, which is what we are doing, be it tax exemptions and import duty exemptions, as we've already done, and support investment by the private sector.
Michael, do you have any final words that you would like to leave our audience with around the initiative?
Yeah, I just ask everyone to get involved. You visit us at www.PCNGi.gov.ng, and you reach out to us and you engage us both on the website and offline. We are committed as a program to supporting Nigeria's much required energy transition, as the case may be, and we look forward to working with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure having you. And I really do commend you for the efforts that you're putting together in this initiative. I'm sure it hasn't been easy, but I know that it's something that if we do correctly, we could watch it grow and bound in the short term. Thank you all for listening in today, and we will be back again in a couple of weeks with another episode of Connecting the Dots.